The mist hangs heavy over the desolate Scottish heath, a shroud not just of vapor but of something far more ancient and menacing, hinting at a world where the veil between the seen and unseen thins to a whisper. It is into this elemental landscape, scarred by recent war, that our narrative truly begins, a tale of ambition ignited, of a soul tragically warped, and of the cascading horror that follows when mortal will challenges the very fabric of nature and divine order. This is the story of Macbeth, a name that reverberates through the ages, not merely as a character from a play, but as a chilling archetype of humanity's darkest capabilities. Our journey commences with a man of formidable prowess, Macbeth, Thane of Glamis, a figure of such valor that his name, even now, is synonymous with courage on the battlefield. Fresh from a brutal victory against the combined forces of the rebellious MacDonald and the invading Norwegians, he rides homeward alongside his loyal comrade, Banquo. The air around them, however, is not merely that of triumph. There is a palpable tension, a foreboding that clings to the very stones of the ancient land. Macbeth, a general garlanded with the laurels of war, possessed within him a fertile ground for aspiration, a quiet craving for status commensurate with his demonstrable might. This was not yet a malevolent ambition, perhaps, but a dormant seed, awaiting the opportune moment or the insidious encouragement to take root and flourish. This critical moment arrives upon that very heaths. As the two victorious generals traverse the stark, windswept terrain, three figures emerge from the swirling fog. Creatures not of this world, or at least not entirely. The Weird Sisters, as they are known, are embodiments of primordial chaos, their appearance grotesque, their utterances enigmatic. To Macbeth, they offer a startling sequence of prophecies. He is already Thane of Glamis, he will become Thane of Cawdor, and most profoundly, he shall be king hereafter. To Banquo, they speak in riddles of lesser fortune yet greater destiny. He will be lesser than Macbeth yet greater. Not so happy yet much happier, and though he will not be a king, his descendants shall wear the crown. The immediate realization of the second prophecy. The announcement that Macbeth has indeed been bestowed the title of Thane of Cawdor by a grateful King Duncan, acts as a potent accelerant to Macbeth's nascent ambition. It imbues the witch's words with an undeniable, terrifying credibility. The thought of kingship, once perhaps a fleeting, illicit daydream, now transforms into a tangible, albeit morally fraught, prospect. The witches, by their very nature, do not force Macbeth's hand, rather they illuminate a path, presenting a vision of a future that resonates with his deepest, unspoken desires. They are less architects of fate and more skilled cartographers of the human soul, charting the hidden currents of avarice and powerlust that lie beneath the surface of even the most honorable men. The profound impact of these prophecies lies not in their inevitability, but in how they awaken and legitimate the ambition that already lay dormant within Macbeth's valiant, yet susceptible heart. Yet Macbeth's internal struggle, his hesitant conscience, might have kept his darker impulses in check were it not for the potent, almost alchemical influence of his wife, Lady Macbeth's. She is introduced to us through a letter from her husband, recounting the witch's prophecies. Her reaction is swift, decisive, and chillingly devoid of moral qualm. She immediately perceives that her husband's nature is too full of the milk of human kindness to seize the crown through the nearest way, which she understands implicitly to mean murder. Lady Macbeth possesses an ambition far more intense, more ruthless, and utterly unburdened by the ethical hesitations that plague her husband. Her desire for power is not merely for herself, but for her husband, a vision of him as the ultimate sovereign, a position she intends to share. Her initial soliloquy is a terrifying invocation, a plea to malevolent spirits to unsex her, to fill her from the crown to the toe-top full of direst cruelty. She seeks to divest herself of all feminine softness, of all human compassion that might impede the bloody deed she now envisions. Her will is a hammer, and Macbeth's conscience, she believes, is merely an impediment to be crushed. When Macbeth arrives at their castle Inverness bearing the news of Duncan's impending visit, Lady Macbeth sees not a monarch to be honored, but an obstacle to be removed. Her dialogue with him is a masterclass in psychological manipulation. She questions his courage, challenges his manhood, and paints a vivid picture of the glory and power that await them, all while skillfully dismantling his moral arguments against regicide. She is the iron will behind his wavering hand, the strategist of the gruesome act. A figure whose chilling determination makes her one of the most compelling and terrifying characters in all of literature. The confluence of these elements, Macbeth's awakened ambition, Lady Macbeth's ferocious resolve, and the seductive, legitimizing power of the witch's prophecies, creates a vortex of temptation. Macbeth finds himself caught in an ethical dilemma, torn between loyalty to his king, guest, and kinsman, and the intoxicating promise of supreme power. The witch's pronouncements, particularly the one hinting at kingship, present a fatalistic illusion. They suggest that his ascension is a preordained destiny. This fatalistic view becomes a dangerous rationalization, subtly eroding his sense of personal responsibility for the heinous acts he contemplates. If destiny dictates his reign, then perhaps his actions are merely instruments of a greater, unalterable plan. This dangerous logic, subtly fostered by the supernatural intervention and overtly hammered home by his wife, weakens his moral defenses, paving the way for the ultimate transgression. The very structure of the Scottish monarchy in the 11th century, a period often characterized by its volatile succession, provides a fertile, albeit bloody, ground for such ambitions to take root. Unlike later, more formalized systems, the Scottish crown was not always passed strictly by primogeniture. The system of tanistry, where the successor was often chosen from eligible male relatives based on perceived suitability for leadership, meant that the throne was perpetually contested, a prize to be won rather than a birthright automatically inherited. This inherent instability, a common feature of early medieval monarchies, naturally fostered a climate where ambitious thanes might view the crown as an attainable, if dangerous, objective. For Macbeth, a victorious general hailed as a hero, the opportunity for such an usurpation would not have seemed entirely unprecedented, though the manner of its execution would prove to be an unparalleled atrocity. King Duncan, while a benevolent ruler, is also portrayed as somewhat naive, perhaps even overly trusting, particularly of Macbeth, bestowing upon him immense honors and visiting his castle without apparent apprehension. This unsuspecting trust, juxtaposed with the ambition brewing within his host, sets the stage for a betrayal of monumental proportions. To fully comprehend the tragic arc of Macbeth, one must first immerse oneself in the world from which it sprang. The rugged, tumultuous landscape of 11th century Scotland and the vibrant, yet often superstitious, intellectual milieu of Jacobean England, where William Shakespeare conceived and penned this masterpiece. The real Macbeth, Macbeth Mac Finlach, was indeed a historical king of Scotland. Unlike Shakespeare's tragic figure, the historical Macbeth ruled for a significant period, some 17 years. From 1040 to 1057, a reign often characterized by relative peace and effective governance, particularly after he secured the throne by killing King Duncan I in battle near Elgin. This was not the stealthy, guilt-ridden regicide depicted in the play, but a customary, if brutal, means of succession in a period of fierce competition for power. Duncan himself was a relatively young king who had struggled to assert his authority. Macbeth, a successful military commander and Duncan's cousin, held a legitimate claim to the throne through his marriage to Gruach, a granddaughter of a previous Scottish king. The historical record suggests a complex figure, far removed from the spiraling tyrant of Shakespeare's imagination. Yet it is this very divergence from historical fact that makes Shakespeare's work so compelling. He reshaped history to explore universal truths about human nature. Shakespeare's primary source for the Scottish portion of his play was Raphael Holinshed's Chronicles of England, Scotland and Ireland, published in 1577. Holinshed's account, itself a compilation of earlier histories, presented Macbeth as a brave and capable general who, spurred by the prophecies of three weirds or goddesses, later interpreted as witches and further encouraged by his wife, murdered Duncan in his sleep. Crucially, Holinshed also noted that Banquo, Macbeth's companion in the play, was depicted as an ancestor of King James VI of Scotland, who became James I of England upon Elizabeth I's death in 1603. This connection is profoundly significant. When Shakespeare wrote Macbeth around 1606, he was crafting a play for a new monarch, King James I, who had a deep, almost obsessive interest in witchcraft and the divine right of kings. James had personally authored Demonology, published in 1597, a treatise on the nature of witchcraft and the perceived dangers it posed to society and monarchical rule. He was also a firm believer in the sanctity of kingship, viewing monarchs as God's appointed representatives on earth. Regicide, the murder of a king, was therefore not merely a crime, but an act of profound sacrilege, a direct challenge to the divinely ordained order. In this context, Macbeth serves multiple functions. It acts as a cautionary tale against ambition and regicide, clearly articulating the chaotic and ultimately self-destructive consequences of challenging legitimate authority. It also subtly flatters King James by depicting Banquo, his purported ancestor, as a virtuous figure whose descendants are destined for greatness. Even as Macbeth, the usurper, descends into madness and ruin, the prominence of the witches, their sinister prophecies, and the palpable sense of evil that permeates the play would have resonated deeply with a monarch who genuinely feared and believed in the power of dark magic. The play was thus a shrewd piece of dramatic artistry, both entertaining and politically attuned to the sensibilities of the reigning monarch. The Elizabethan and Jacobean eras were also marked by a profound fascination with the supernatural and the unseen. Astrology, alchemy, omens, and witchcraft were not fringe beliefs but woven into the fabric of daily life for many. The fear of witches, often blamed for unexplained misfortunes, bad harvests, or illness, led to widespread persecution. Shakespeare, therefore, was not introducing an alien concept but tapping into deep-seated societal anxieties and beliefs when he depicted the Weird Sisters. Their power, ambiguous and manipulative rather than overtly coercive, reflects a nuanced understanding of how such beliefs could influence human actions. The witches do not make Macbeth kill Duncan, they merely articulate a possibility that he then chooses to pursue, illustrating the pervasive belief that supernatural forces could tempt and influence, but ultimately, human beings retained their free will. Furthermore, the early 17th century was a time of significant intellectual and social upheaval. The Renaissance, with its renewed focus on humanism, was giving way to an increasing exploration of individual psychology and the complexities of human nature. Shakespeare, a master of this exploration, delved into the inner workings of his characters, showcasing their motivations, their moral struggles, and their psychological disintegration with unprecedented depth. Macbeth's descent into tyranny is not merely a sequence of external events but a meticulously chronicled internal implosion, driven by guilt, paranoia, and the relentless demands of maintaining ill-gotten power. Lady Macbeth's equally harrowing journey from ruthless resolve to guilt-ridden madness is a profound study in the destructive power of a disturbed conscience. Thus, the backdrop of Macbeth is a rich tapestry woven from historical events, royal patronage, popular superstitions, and a burgeoning understanding of human psychology. It is a play deeply rooted in its time, yet its themes, the corrupting nature of ambition, the insidious power of guilt, The battle between fate and free will and the fragility of moral order transcend specific historical contexts to speak to universal human experiences, ensuring its enduring power across centuries. The true tragedy of Macbeth unfolds not in a single, cataclysmic event, but through a chilling, inexorable descent. A domino effect of blood and deceit initiated by that first, unforgivable act. Following the witch's prophecies and the intoxicating, relentless goading of Lady Macbeth, the stage is set for regicide. King Duncan, a benevolent ruler, trusting and unsuspecting, arrives at Inverness, Macbeth's castle, where he is welcomed with effusive, if utterly false, hospitality. This is a crucial detail. The crime is compounded by the violation of every sacred bond of kinsman, of host, and of subject to sovereign. Macbeth initially is racked by moral torment. He enumerates the compelling reasons not to commit the deed. Duncan is his kinsman and his king. A man of such virtue that his virtues will plead like angels, trumpet-tongued, against the deep damnation of his taking off. Furthermore, as his host, Macbeth should be his slayer. His conscience screams at the enormity of the contemplated betrayal. But Lady Macbeth, with a chilling precision, dismantles his objections, one by one. She questions his love for her, equates his hesitation with cowardice, and mocks his manhood, telling him, "When you dared to do it, then you were a man." She even invokes the image of her own infant, suggesting she would have dashed the brains out of her child rather than break a solemn vow, effectively shaming him into action. Her manipulation is absolute. A relentless psychological assault that ultimately crushes Macbeth's moral reservations under the weight of his own ambition and his desperate need to prove himself to his formidable wife. The plan is simple yet brutal. While Duncan sleeps, his two chamberlains will be drugged with copious wine, rendering them insensible. Macbeth will then use their daggers to murder the king, smearing the blood on the sleeping guards to implicate them. On the night of the murder, as Macbeth steals towards Duncan's chamber, he experiences a terrifying hallucination. A dagger, its handle towards his hand, yet its blade dripping with blood, floating before him. This spectral weapon is a chilling manifestation of his tormented mind, a sign that the moral equilibrium of his soul is already profoundly disturbed. Even before the deed is done, it is the first crack in his sanity, a precursor to the horrors to come. He proceeds with the act. The actual murder is swift, unseen, and unspeakably violent. Immediately afterward, Macbeth is consumed by profound horror and guilt. He hears voices crying, "Sleep no more, Macbeth does murder sleep." He is unable to say Amen when the chamberlains stir and pray. He returns to Lady Macbeth, utterly distraught, clutching the bloody daggers, having forgotten to plant them on the guards. She, still outwardly composed, scolds him for his weakness, takes the daggers, and smears the sleeping grooms with Duncan's blood, exhibiting a chilling practicality that momentarily dwarfs her husband's remorse. But even her composure is a carefully constructed facade, as she later confesses her inability to perform the act herself because the sleeping Duncan resembled her father. The seed of her own psychological unraveling is subtly planted here. The discovery of Duncan's body throws the castle into chaos. Macbeth, feigning shock and righteous fury, swiftly murders the two drugged chamberlains before they can awaken and protest their innocence, effectively silencing the only potential witnesses. Duncan's sons, Malcolm and Donalbain, fearing for their own lives, flee, Malcolm to England, Donalbain to Ireland. Their flight, ironically, casts suspicion upon them, playing directly into Macbeth's hands and allowing him to seize the throne, as the next in line to the throne often would have been elected by the Thanes, and their absence left a vacuum. The crown, the object of such immense desire, now rests uneasily upon Macbeth's head. The initial euphoria of kingship is fleeting, almost immediately replaced by a gnawing paranoia. The witch's prophecy regarding Banquo that his descendants would be kings, though he would not, now becomes a source of unbearable anxiety for Macbeth. He has filed his mind, he laments, and put rancors in the vessel of his peace only for them, and his eternal jewel given to the common enemy of man to make them kings, the seed of Banquo kings. His crime, he realizes, has paved the way for Banquo's lineage, making his own reign a mere placeholder. This fear, coupled with Banquo's noble and discerning nature, makes Banquo a profound threat. Macbeth resolves to eliminate both Banquo and his young son, Fleance. He commissions a group of murderers to ambush Banquo and Fleance as they return to the castle for a state banquet. The ambush is partially successful. Banquo is slain, but Fleance, through a twist of fate, manages to escape into the night. This escape proves to be a pivotal point. It means the witch's prophecy about Banquo's lineage remains a terrifying, looming possibility, perpetually undermining Macbeth's sense of security. The root of his fear, as he perceives it, has not been entirely eradicated. The consequences of this botched murder are immediately apparent at the banquet, a scene of escalating tension and horror. While seated at the feast, Macbeth is confronted by Banquo's ghost, visible only to him, occupying his seat at the table. This apparition, a terrifying manifestation of his guilt and deepening psychosis, sends Macbeth into a frenzy of terrified pronouncements. He challenges the horrible shadow, speaks to the empty chair, and reveals his madness to his court. Lady Macbeth, ever attempting to maintain appearances, tries to cover for him, dismissing his behavior as a fit, an old affliction. But the damage is done. The lords of Scotland, already suspicious due to Duncan's murder and the flight of his sons, now bear witness to their king's rapidly deteriorating sanity. His tyrannical grip on power begins to visibly slip. Driven by an escalating paranoia and a desperate need for reassurance, Macbeth returns to the Weird Sisters, demanding further prophecies. They present him with 3 new apparitions, each delivering an enigmatic pronouncement. First, an armed head warns him to beware Macduff, the Thane of Fife, who has conspicuously absented himself from Macbeth's court. Second, a bloody child declares that none of woman born shall harm Macbeth. Third, a crowned child holding a tree proclaims that Macbeth shall never be vanquished until great Burnham wood to high Dunsinane hill shall come against him. Macbeth interprets these prophecies with an arrogant, fatalistic confidence. He believes himself invincible, secure in the knowledge that no man born of a woman can touch him, and that forests cannot literally move. Yet his anxiety persists, particularly regarding Banquo's lineage. He demands to know if Banquo's issue will ever reign. In response, the witches present a vision of a procession of 8 kings, the last one holding a mirror reflecting many more, all followed by the ghost of Banquo, pointing to them as his descendants. This vision crushes Macbeth, confirming his deepest fear. His bloody reign is futile, merely a bridge to Banquo's line. In a fit of rage and fear, now convinced that Macduff poses a threat despite the apparition's assurances, Macbeth orders the ruthless slaughter of Macduff's entire family, his wife, children, and all his servants. At Fife, this act, unlike the politically motivated murders of Duncan and Banquo, is a crime of sheer, wanton cruelty born of frustration and unchecked power. It is a turning point, marking Macbeth's complete transformation from a morally conflicted warrior into a depraved, indiscriminate tyrant. He has crossed a line from strategic, if evil, acts to senseless barbarity, cementing his image as a monstrous oppressor in the eyes of his subjects. The escalating atrocities under Macbeth's reign have plunged Scotland into a state of utter desolation. The once noble land now groans under his tyranny, soaked in blood and echoing with the cries of the innocent. The lords are alienated, living in fear, while whispers of rebellion grow louder. Macduff, now in England, hears the devastating news of his family's murder. His grief, profound and raw, hardens into an unshakable resolve for vengeance. Malcolm, Duncan's son, has also found refuge in England and has gained the support of King Edward the Confessor, a benevolent and powerful ruler. A large English army led by the experienced General Seward is assembled to invade Scotland and overthrow the tyrant. While Macbeth's external empire crumbles, an equally devastating internal collapse afflicts Lady Macbeth. The once unyielding woman, whose iron will propel her husband to the throne, is now haunted by the bloody deeds she instigated. Her initial composure has completely shattered. She begins to sleepwalk, enacting the torments of her conscience in a chilling nocturnal ritual observed by her gentlewoman and a doctor. In her sleep, she relives the night of Duncan's murder, desperately trying to wash imaginary bloodstains from her hands. Uttering the now iconic, anguished cry, "Out, damned spot, out I say." She confesses to the murders of Duncan and Banquo and speaks of Macduff's wife, her mind replaying every horrific detail. This descent into madness, this inability to cleanse her soul, mirrors the physical blood she could not wash from her hands after Duncan's murder. She dies by her own hand, a victim of her own uncontainable guilt, her final silent act a testament to the ultimate destructive power of a disturbed conscience. News of Lady Macbeth's death reaches Macbeth amidst the preparations for battle. His reaction, though tinged with weariness and a reflection on life's futility, that she should have died hereafter. That there would have been a time for such a word, is notably devoid of deep emotional grief. His own soul is too consumed by war and despair for profound mourning. He has become emotionally numb, a man isolated by his crimes, his world reduced to the grim realities of impending conflict. The climax of this detailed narrative converges on Dunsinane Hill, where Macbeth makes his final stand. The English forces, augmented by disaffected Scottish lords, advance. As they march through Burnham Wood, Malcolm issues a strategic command. Each soldier should cut down a branch and carry it before him to conceal their numbers. As Macbeth's scouts observe this approaching wood, they report that Burnham Wood appears to be moving towards Dunsinane. One of the witch's prophecies once deemed impossible has been chillingly fulfilled, not by magic, but by a simple military stratagem. Macbeth's hubris begins to crack. Yet he still clings to the second prophecy, that none of woman born shall harm Macbeth. He fights with desperate ferocity, believing himself invulnerable. In the chaos of battle, he encounters Macduff, who has been searching for him, driven by a profound need for personal vengeance. When Macbeth taunts him with the prophecy, Macduff delivers the devastating revelation that he was from his mother's womb untimely ripped. Born by caesarean section, thus technically not of woman born in the conventional sense. The final piece of the witch's riddle falls into place, shattering Macbeth's last vestige of confidence. He is not invincible, his fate is sealed. A brutal, desperate duel ensues between the two men. Macbeth, for all his monstrousness, fights with the courage of a doomed warrior. But his crimes have stripped him of divine favor and moral strength. Macduff, the instrument of righteous retribution, ultimately triumphs. The cacophony of war that had gripped Dunsinane for days finally gives way to an eerie, profound silence. The last vestige of Macbeth's tyranny, his own physical presence, has been brutally extinguished. Macduff, embodying the swift and decisive hand of justice, re-enters the stage bearing a gruesome but profoundly symbolic trophy. Macbeth's severed head. This image, visceral and shocking, is the definitive mark of a monstrous reign brought to its violent, prophesied end. The man who once carved a bloody path to the throne now lies headless, his ambitions' harvest reduced to nothing but ignominious defeat. His death is not merely the demise of a king, but the symbolic cleansing of a poisoned land. A stark punctuation mark to the relentless cycle of violence and deceit he initiated. In a grim counterpoint to Macbeth's violent end, the fate of Lady Macbeth, though less overtly bloody, is no less tragic. Her mental unraveling, the sleepwalking, the obsessive hand-washing, the tortured confessions witnessed by her attendants and the doctor, had painted a harrowing picture of a soul consumed by guilt. She is reported to have died by her own hand, a suicide born of an internal torment that proved far more destructive than any external enemy. The woman who once invoked spirits to unsex her and fill her with direst cruelty ultimately could not escape the very human burden of her conscience. Her ambition, once cold and unyielding, fractured under the immense psychological weight of her crimes, leaving her utterly exposed to the ravages of her own mind. Her death underscores the profound truth that even the most hardened hearts can be broken by the memory of evil deeds. A silent testament to the inescapable justice of the human psyche. With Macbeth vanquished and the usurpation ended, the throne of Scotland, for so long stained by blood and fear, now stands ready for its rightful heir. Malcolm, the eldest son of the murdered King Duncan, steps forward to claim his birthright. His return marks the restoration of legitimate authority, a return to the natural order that Macbeth so grievously disrupted. In his first act as the rightful King of Scotland, Malcolm immediately begins the process of healing and rebuilding. He pledges to recall the exiled nobles, distribute justice fairly, and reward those who have been loyal to the true cause. He bestows the title of Earl upon the Thanes, a new honorific inspired by English tradition, signifying a deliberate move towards a more stable and centralized monarchy, promising a future of continuity and order rather than the chaotic elective system that preceded it. The fall of Macbeth, therefore, is not merely the conclusion of a personal tragedy, but the definitive end of a reign of terror that had plunged Scotland into a prolonged nightmare. The air of pervasive fear, suspicion, and arbitrary violence that characterized Macbeth's rule is systematically dismantled. The land, which groaned under his tyranny, begins to breathe again. The natural world, which Shakespeare often portrays as being in disharmony with unnatural human acts, is now able to reassert its proper balance. The owls that shrieked, the horses that ate each other, the darkness that usurped the day, all these unnatural phenomena, metaphors for the moral perversion of Macbeth's rule, can now recede. With Malcolm's ascendance, a promise of peace and stability emerges, signaling a return to a moral and political equilibrium. The kingdom, once caught in the terrifying grip of a brutal dictator, is finally liberated, poised to embark on a path of recovery and renewal under a just and legitimate monarch. The narrative arc of Macbeth, therefore, culminates in a chilling, yet ultimately cathartic tableau. The audacious ambition that seized Macbeth, amplified by the seductive prophecies and his wife's ruthless will, led to a rapid accumulation of power, followed by an even swifter descent into paranoia, madness, and unbridled tyranny. The play meticulously charts the devastating consequences of such a path, not only the destruction of innocence and the suffering of a nation, but the absolute annihilation of the perpetrators themselves. Macbeth's pursuit of the crown, meant to secure his future, instead sealed his doom, transforming him from a celebrated warrior into a universally reviled tyrant, ultimately isolated and broken. Lady Macbeth, whose initial strength seemed unbreakable, crumbles under the weight of her conscience, demonstrating that even the most formidable cannot withstand the psychological retribution for grievous sins. Their ends are a powerful, chilling testament to the self-destructive nature of unchecked ambition and the inescapable burden of guilt. The play closes with a vision of a restored moral order, but the scars of Macbeth's reign, and the profound questions his actions raise about human nature, linger long after the final curtain falls. The enduring resonance of Shakespeare's Macbeth stretches far beyond the confines of the theatrical stage, permeating the very fabric of Western culture, influencing literature, psychology, and popular imagination in profound and unexpected ways. Its impact is not merely academic, it is deeply ingrained in our collective consciousness, providing a potent lens through which to examine timeless human dilemmas. At its core, Macbeth serves as an unparalleled exploration of the corrupting essence of absolute power and the insidiousness of unchecked ambition. This fundamental theme, that absolute power corrupts absolutely, finds its most vivid and horrifying illustration in the swift, brutal transformation of Macbeth from a valiant general into a blood-soaked tyrant. The play meticulously charts how the pursuit of power, once attained through violent means, necessitates further violence to maintain, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of fear, paranoia, and atrocity. It poses a stark, uncompromising warning, revealing how the lure of the crown can strip away a man's morality, humanity, and ultimately, his sanity. This narrative trajectory, where a seemingly noble individual succumbs to inner darkness, has become a foundational archetype in literature and political commentary, often invoked to describe the dangers inherent in any unchecked authority. Beyond the political, Macbeth offers one of the most penetrating psychological studies in all of drama, particularly regarding the destructive power of guilt. The harrowing descents of both Macbeth and Lady Macbeth into madness, each in their distinct way, provide a chilling exposition of the human conscience. Macbeth's hallucinations, the dagger of the mind, and Banquo's ghost are not mere supernatural tricks. They are external manifestations of his internal torment, his inability to escape the horrors he has wrought. Lady Macbeth's sleepwalking scene, her desperate attempts to wash away imaginary bloodstains, uttering the iconic phrase, "Out, damned spot, out, I say," has transcended the play itself. This specific behavior has given rise to a recognized psychological phenomenon known as the Macbeth Effect. This concept describes the psychological tendency for individuals who have engaged in immoral behavior or who feel guilt to desire physical cleansing, as if washing away the perceived moral taint. It is a testament to the play's profound insight into the mind's intricate connection between the physical and the moral, demonstrating how deeply Shakespeare understood the workings of the human psyche centuries before modern psychology emerged as a formal discipline. The play also presents a masterful and enduring meditation on the complex interplay between fate and free will. The witches' prophecies, while undeniably catalysts, are never explicitly prescriptive. They outline a potential future, but it is Macbeth's subsequent choices, his active decision to commit regicide, and his continuous election of further violence that drive the tragedy forward. The witches merely tap into and articulate a pre-existing ambition within him, providing a potent justification for his darker impulses. This nuanced portrayal of human agency, where external forces may tempt or suggest but ultimately individuals bear the responsibility for their actions, continues to fuel philosophical debate. Macbeth stands as a powerful argument for the primacy of free will, even in the face of what appears to be an ordained destiny, showing how character, choices, and conscience ultimately shape a life's trajectory. The literary and linguistic impact of Macbeth is immeasurable. It is replete with some of Shakespeare's most evocative and frequently quoted lines, phrases that have become indelible parts of the English lexicon. Expressions like fair is foul and foul is fair, encapsulating the play's moral ambiguity. Is this a dagger which I see before me? Sleep no more. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day, and a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing, have woven themselves into everyday speech, enriching the language and providing powerful metaphors for a myriad of human experiences. The play's dense, poetic language, its use of striking imagery such as blood, darkness, and unnatural phenomena, and its structural brilliance continue to be studied and admired by scholars, writers, and theater practitioners worldwide, solidifying its place as a cornerstone of the literary canon. Beyond the text, Macbeth has exerted a monumental influence on dramatic performance and popular culture. It is one of Shakespeare's most frequently performed plays, its brevity and dramatic intensity making it particularly appealing. However, it is famously associated with a theatrical superstition, referring to it as the Scottish play Backstage, rather than by its true title to ward off bad luck. This enduring legend, often attributed to the play's dark themes and history of stage misfortunes, adds another layer to its cultural mystique. The play has been adapted countless times across various media, from opera such as Verdi's Macbeth to film, including Akira Kurosawa's Throne of Blood which is set in feudal Japan, Orson Welles' film, and Justin Kurzel's 2015 adaptation. Each reinterpretation demonstrates its universal applicability and thematic flexibility. These adaptations not only attest to its timeless appeal, but also allow each generation to find its own reflection in its potent themes. Exploring contemporary political corruption, the psychological scars of war, or the insidious nature of power in new contexts. Ultimately, Macbeth is far more than a historical drama. It is a primal scream against human folly. A profound psychological examination and a timeless narrative of temptation, transgression, and ultimate annihilation. It stands as a monumental achievement in Western literature, a work that continues to challenge, disturb, and enlighten, reminding us of the fragility of order, the seductive lure of power, and the inescapable truth that our choices, however subtly influenced, ultimately forge our own fates. Its legacy is etched not only in the annals of theater and literature, but in the very language we speak and the fundamental questions we continue to ask about the nature of good, evil, and the human soul.